Hi there. I'm Vita from Rooted Arts, and this is Eric, who will be my model again today. Thank you for joining us for this video on unwinding tension. So I've talked a bit in other videos about assessment, just looking at how the body lines up and where it is posturally. And this is kind of another step in that. And it's actually a really great way to start off a massage, or even just to focus for an hour, to just kind of chase the unwinding around the body, right? And be present with where it shifts to. So I'm going to start at the legs. And what I'm looking at is, again, where are my bony protrusions and how do they line up? Where are they in terms of the posture that we consider ideal? And where are they in terms of how that idealized posture falls into Eric's natural comfort, right? Or whoever you're working on. So we have these great bony protrusions where lots of soft tissue attaches. And they're wonderful because they stick out a bit. We have the sides of our knees, we have the sides of our ankles, the sides of our hips here, right here. There we go. We also have the tops of our hips. We have our shoulders. We have these bumps, the mastoid processes behind our ears. We have the base of our skull, right? Those are just great markers to think about, like, how does alignment work? Where am I seeing twists or turns in the body that seem like they're causing tension? And just looking, again, can help the body relax. Just being present with what the body's doing already kind of invites it to focus on itself. So I can see that there's some hip imbalance happening. The way that Eric's legs are falling kind of indicate that to me. And then this hip looks a little bit higher. One of his feet is everted or out more than the other. This shoulder looks a little bit higher. So really this side of the body, until we get down to his knees, looks a little bit higher. And there looks just like there's some twisting. His head is just a little bit off to one side. So that speaks to tension that is probably being held in the fascia, that connective tissue that covers everything at every layer, right? So I'm going to lift with his feet. I'm holding on to the base of his heels, and I'm just gently pulling toward me. Now, when you do this, you want to make sure that you don't hyperextend the knee. It doesn't want to be really flat ever. So I'm keeping a nice bend in his knee, and I'm holding his feet a little lower to just make sure that that bend stays in there. And then I'm shifting from one side to the other. I pulled the table a little bit, so I'm going to push it back up. And putting his legs down a little straighter. And I'm going to pull the bolster or pillow that I have under his knees a little bit towards me and a little bit even to just kind of adjust where it's sitting. And that already has created some change in his hips. And now I noticed that eversion in his feet, right, where they're pointed out. So I'm going to work with that a little bit. And I'm pulling up on the outside of his feet and just watching how that reflects in his legs. And you can see that there's a pretty, it's still subtle, but a pretty emphasized movement in his legs. And I can feel tightness on the outside of both of his feet. And so when I pull up like this, I'm pulling the bottom of his foot closer to his knee on this side, inviting the muscle to shorten and to relax, to take the space that it needs to make it comfortable. I'm just holding. And how does this feel, Eric?
Really great.
Right, so I'm not doing that much. It already feels really, really great. A lot of providing a great massage is about how we touch and the intention that we're touching with. If I'm comfortable, then it offers more comfort to him, right? Okay, so I'm going back up, and again, I'm looking at where things line up. So I'm looking at this knee closest to me, and I'm looking at the different places that it kind of goes to through fascial connection. So I'm looking at how it connects to the far hip, how it connects to this hip here, how it connects to the shoulder above, how it connects to the rib cage, right? Because fascia, since it's traveling in all these layers, in all these areas, really is a great opportunity to already do release. So I'm just doing a gentle, like, you don't ever want to push. I always talk about being gentle, right? And staying in that range of comfort on that 0 to 10 scale, like really around a 4, because unless you have a lot of an anatomical knowledge, you don't want to go deep because you can end up hurting people. But just holding as a brace against those lower ribs, which again are floaters, so you really don't want to put a lot of pressure, and just holding and spreading. Holding onto his knee on the outside with my thumb, and I'm holding up onto his ribs. And just creating a stretch between, and I'm probably using like a 2. Does this feel like a 2?
Like a 1 or a 2.
Like a 1 or a 2. So super low, but how does it feel?
Very good.
Yeah. So it's a really gentle stretch. You think about working with fascia like you're working with saran wrap, right? Because it's a wrapping tissue and it's super light. And if you work with saran wrap too hard, it'll just crumble and you can't do anything with it. Well, fascia's kind of like that. It'll spring back, it'll get wrinkles in it. So you want to just be gentle, be slow. Now I'm going up to his shoulder. So I'm doing, looks like that. And it's just a gentle, again, very gentle spreading. This feels like there's a little bit more tension, and I'm going a little bit in a further stretch. So might feel a little bit more pressure.
Like a 4 in my shoulder.
And again, this is actually mostly focused on Eric's thigh. So the shoulder is unwinding a little bit, but mostly the knee is unwinding. And now I'm going to go into the knee and back into this hip because I want to lift it because it was lower than this whole side. So I'm really unwinding this hip that seemed impacted and like it was pulling things. And as you practice this, you will start to understand more about what you're seeing. So just playing with it, what you want to keep in mind is moving towards balance in the body, because it's imbalance that causes discomfort more frequently than it's something being really tight, right? Because if we're just tight on one side, then that like feels, we're all like scrunched up and curled towards it. Even if we're a little tight on both sides, if it's balanced, it typically doesn't hurt. And now I'm going into his sternum. And again, being really gentle because all of our ribs connect on our sternum. And we don't want to hurt anything. And I'm just watching the body kind of straighten out a little more. And I'm going to go up to his head. And now, if you notice, I'm going in a circle around, right? So now I'm just placing my hands under the base of his skull to kind of get some lift and some space under his neck here. And I'm going to, now that I've made that space, I pulled my left hand out and I'm sneaking it back under so that I can lift his whole head and get this hand under his back. You can kind of see I'm lifting his chest here just a little so that now I've moved my left hand out again and I'm going under his chest. I'm just kind of walking down. And now I can pop up. My hands are just inside of his shoulder blades on either side. I'm going to be careful about your posture. I just realized I was hunching there. And this, I can go down even further, but this allows me to lift up his torso and kind of shift it to follow that straightening, right? I'm just trying to get a nice alignment from his nose to his pubic bone. This kind of a line that I'm looking for here. I want his head centered over his shoulders. And I'm just gonna, since I'm here, gonna pull on the base of his cranium. You know, at any of these spots, right, you can revisit older videos because I talk a little bit about fascia in each. And this is just using those same techniques to work around the body and encourage it to unwind. So now this shoulder is a little bit higher, and I'm going to go across from shoulder to shoulder. And I'm pushing out and a little bit toward the table, but mostly just out. Allowing gentle shifting, where I'm not necessarily holding it static, keeping pretty gentle. What would you say this is?
About a 4.
About a 4. Keeping still in that range of gentle comfort and going back in. And just allowing my hands to glide with the fascia, to like sync with it. I'm not going into long strokes, but I am just allowing it to sync. So now I'm going to continue focusing on this shoulder because I can see that there is a cross-fascial relation between this shoulder and that hip. And again, the more you play with this, the more you'll start to see those things and how they work together. So I'm actually going to pull up on this shoulder because it looks like it needs more space. Can I have this arm?
Yeah.
So if your person that you're working on picks up their arm, totally normal. You just ask for them to give it to you. And I'm holding onto his chest and holding on by his elbow, by those bony protrusions. Just creating a little more space. Doing a gentle stretch. And then I'm going to go into his shoulder and his hip. And this is the hip on the same side. And I'm just finding where I feel that restricted fascia, that restricted kind of surface tension is what it feels like, as though there were, like, again, that saran wrap is how I think about it. Like just restriction, right? I'm just doing a gentle stretch, and I can see this right hip dropping in response and releasing. I'm going to go from that shoulder down to this knee. And actually, so when I did this big stretch that you can't really see, where I'm down on his knee and up to his shoulder, it felt focused on the inside of it. So I'm actually going to get my hands a little closer and just follow that impulse and check in and kind of feel where that cellophane-like tightness is, and then do the gentle pull there. And I'm watching these ribs, right? I don't want to put direct pressure on bones that are really pretty fragile. And then I can see that this leg is just a little more out, right? His toes are a little more everted on this side than on the other side, which makes sense. I started there. So I'm gonna pick up the leg and the foot and just turn it slightly toward me. And I'm actually going to put some pressure on that hip to keep it down and pick up by the foot and turn it, again, slightly inward. And then I'm following that down. So I'm using this area as an anchor on the side of his knee, using his foot, pulling it up toward his head and also turning it back inward. And then they look to be about the same. And his posture seems a lot more balanced. How are you feeling, Eric?
Great. I feel a lot more open in my hips. And my low back feels great.
Yeah. And he mentioned actually before we started the video that his low back was a little uncomfortable. And I made him wait so that we could be on screen. But yeah, thank you for being such a good sport. So you can see that just the walking around, you can keep walking around in a circle like that and just pay attention to what would benefit from a little bit of motion and adjustment. And staying in that range of comfort will really keep you safe and support you in helping the body that you're working on unwind, even without putting in that much work, that much effort. You just take it slow and use a present, gentle, loving touch. I love you. I love me. I love us. I'll see you soon.